don't know if you've noticed this or not, or if it's just me, but there seems to be a big rise in people begging for money around these parts lately. I mean, there's a guy who stands at the bottom of Lick Hill, and he's probably been there for about a year now, but he's no longer alone in this area. Every single time I go to Katanning Walmart, there is someone begging across the street from Pizza Hut, and it's always somebody different. Every time I go to Pittsburgh, there's always someone begging for money on the corner of Fifth Avenue. I even saw a mom with a couple of her girls there begging for money for new outfits for her cheerleader daughters. And most of the time when I see people begging, I wonder to myself if they really do need the money or if this is just some kind of scam. I mean, there are obviously all kinds of scammers out there these days, including people who pretend to be homeless and or injured.
Just how genuine are those people you see on the street asking for a handout? Day after day, we watch this sad, pathetic woman hobbling on crutches and shaking her cup for donations. And boy, did her cup runneth over.
Yeah, here you go, okay?
Her territory was the Avenue of Avenues, Fifth Avenue, where stores like Gucci, Prada, and Tiffany's attract wealthy and apparently generous shoppers. One after another, we saw them dropping cash into her cup. On busy days, she averaged an amazing 50 donations an hour. She certainly looks like a sad and desperate lady, but we were a little suspicious, so we followed her. Here she is, getting off a bus in Queens and hopping into a minivan. But it's a totally different looking woman that emerges when the van pulls over. Why, it's a miracle. Here she is, walking perfectly fine.
It's so sad that in this day and age you have to worry about whether or not you're being scammed by somebody who seems to really need the money. So then, what's the answer, knowing that there are so many scammers out there? I mean, is the answer don't give to anybody? Interview the person before you give to them? Ask to see a copy of their bank statement before handing over the cash? I mean, seriously, what are we supposed to do? It is a sad world that we live in when you have to second guess helping someone out. Jesus tells a story one time that you're probably familiar with, I'm guessing, about somebody who was definitely in need of a helping hand. That story is the story of the Good Samaritan. And in this story, there was a dude traveling down the road from Jerusalem to Jericho when all of a sudden he gets jumped and mugged. Now, this mugging left him naked, bloody, beaten, with nothing, basically passed out on the side of the road. Now, this was a highly traveled road, so although he was left hurt and stranded, luckily people are going to come across him and see him laying there. Well, the first guy who comes across him is a pastor who's coming home on his way from work. And when the pastor sees him, he walks over to the other side of the road and then just keeps on going. Well, a little while, an elder from the church comes walking by, and he sees this guy. And when he sees him laying there, injured badly, he walks over to the other side of the road too. And you begin to think, man, if even these two spiritual guys aren't willing to help a guy in need, then it seems like nobody's going to help this poor guy. They're just going to let him lay there until he dies. Well, then along comes a third man. But sadly, this man is a Samaritan. He's not even a Jew. So according to the Jews of his day, he's pretty much worthless. And just like the other two, the Samaritan sees this man laying hurting on the side of the road. But instead of walking to the other side of the road, he actually stays on his side this time and walks up to the injured man, and he has pity on him. And he thinks, man, if this were me laying in the middle of that road, dying, I would sure hope that somebody would care enough to make sure that I got back on my feet. Well, the Samaritan stops and not only tends to his wounds, but he throws the guy onto his own donkey, takes him to the hospital, and then offers to pay his bills, whatever bills were being racked up while this guy was in recovery. That's a pretty good Samaritan. That's a pretty good guy. And Jesus says, this This is what it means to love your neighbor. And if I'm being honest, it seems pretty common sense to me. I mean, does it seem common sense to you? Of course, the person who stops and helps the bleeding man on the side of the road is the loving person. But seriously, like, who in real life would go to the other side of the road and just keep walking by? I mean, seriously, if you saw this, you would stop, wouldn't you? I think we all want to say yes and believe that that answer is yes. But before you commit to an answer, there's a super important question that must be asked first. What's that question? The question is, what road are they on? Why does that matter, what road they're on? Well, let's put this story into a modern day scenario. If you were driving down a back road and there's not a whole lot of traffic that ever travels on this road, you haven't seen any cars coming, any cars going, and then you come across an old lady whose car is broken down and she's standing outside looking as if she needs help, how likely are you to stop? You're the only one on this road. Well, I think the answer is you're very likely. You will feel an overwhelming need to be a loving neighbor and offer your phone or maybe even a ride. If you just sped right past her and kept on going, you would regret it and really feel like a loser afterwards. Now let's change the road that we're on. So same lady, same broken down car, same side of the road, except this time we're driving down Route 28 heading into Pittsburgh. So now we're on a busy highway with cars all around you in both directions, and you look ahead and you see an old lady who is broken down on the side of the road and she's standing outside like she needs help. How likely are you to stop? The chances of you stopping now, well, they've dropped to near zero. Why? What has happened? It's the same old lady, same broken down car. It's a different road. What has changed is the fact that you are no longer the only one around to help. Now, instead, there are hundreds of people driving by, and I'm sure that one of those people is better equipped to help this lady out. One of those people has more time than you have, don't you think? Maybe you know the name of this phenomenon that I'm speaking of. It's called the bystander effect. The bystander effect says that if you see someone in need or a situation in need and you are alone, you are much more likely to jump into action than if you share that responsibility with a group of people. If you've ever gotten a flat tire and been broken down on a busy road, you know exactly what I'm speaking of. Your chance of having someone stop gets lower and lower as the road gets busier and busier. Hundreds of cars can pass by, and none of them will stop because each one of them figures that somebody else will do it. That is called the diffusion of responsibility. Diffusion of responsibility. The guys in the story of the Good Samaritan, they may not have actually been traveling in a group, but they were traveling on the same road, which means that they knew others would be along and therefore didn't feel an incredible need to offer assistance. After all, somebody else could do it. Somebody else was going to be more equipped. This is a very real and very verifiable social psychological phenomena. Just how strong is this phenomenon? Have a watch.
But what would you do if you knew your group was entirely wrong? Would you, for example, sit in a burning room just because everyone else does? This hotel conference suite has been prepared for a focus group discussion on internet shopping. But all is not as it seems. We've been busy. The place is rigged with 4 hidden cameras and 6 concealed microphones.
So this is a questionnaire all about kind of shopping habits and everything here. So just move that off your chair. So
Our first participant is Mary Mizuno, a London student who thinks she's arrived early. What she doesn't know is that behind this door there's about to be a serious fire in the hotel kitchen. Or at least the illusion of one, created by a smoke machine and some sound effects. What will she do?
She's now noticed the smoke and is concerned. At this point, she decides to investigate to find out what's going on. She's immediately taken responsibility for figuring out what to do.
Mary does the sensible thing and evacuates quickly. But Mary was on her own. This time, we've planted 7 actors who are all in on the experiment. We've said to them, when you see the smoke, do nothing. Our second participant is Lauren Heffernan, also a student. What will she do? Nothing to start with, so we get her attention. Now, how long before she dashes out of the room?
She's checking increasingly to see what the other people are thinking. But who can she appeal to? The answer is nobody. She turns to the norm of the group. Ignore the smoke. She's waiting for someone else to react. Why isn't anyone else reacting? She feels uncomfortable. She doesn't want to embarrass herself by taking the lead, taking action. But something is definitely wrong.
Lauren stayed in the room for 20 minutes after spotting the smoke, concerned but immobile. The fire brigade say that if this fire had been real, even if flames hadn't burnt through the door, she would have died of asphyxiation in this time. In the end, we had to ask her to leave.
What about here? Thanks.
Isn't that crazy? I'm sure that if you asked these people if they would stay in a burning room because someone else was going to take care of the problem, they would tell you that you're crazy. Absolutely crazy. But this experiment found that 90% of the time, if smoke began to fill the waiting room, people didn't say anything if there were 3 or more people in the room with them. That is the bystander effect. That is diffusion of responsibility. The bystander effect says the more people who you share a responsibility with, or the greater the diffusion of responsibility is, the less likely you are to actually do anything in a situation that would otherwise require your action. Now, this effect can definitely be seen as one of the motivators for the people in the story of the Good Samaritan who kept walking by, just kept on walking past this man who was laying hurt on the side of the road. Somebody else was going to stop. Why is it important for a sermon to be dedicated to this phenomenon? Why is that? Well, because it's only when we identify its presence that we have a real chance to rise above it. Diffusion of responsibility is not a good enough reason to ignore the hurting in our lives. But at the same time, this is sometimes exactly what we do. Just like everybody else, we drive by someone who's broken down without stopping because everybody's got a cell phone and they probably already called somebody. We'll see a tragedy taking place in the world and we'll change the channel because, after all, somebody else has got this one covered. We are for the sanctity of life, but there are bigger groups out there than just me who can battle to save unborn children. A dog is straying into traffic, and I can keep going because somebody else is going to stop. A bully is bullying someone, but there's somebody that knows him better, in a better place to help than I am. Someone is sick, but other people will send cards or make food. Someone is hungry, but that's what the government is for. We have those government programs for a reason. Someone is begging for money. Other people will give him their change. Someone is hurting. Other people have more time to check in on them. There's a guy laying beaten on the side of the road. I'm sure somebody else is better equipped to help him. I think I'll just move over to the other side. How many times have we not clothed the naked, fed the hungry, helped the poor, protected the weak, because someone else would probably do it better? How many times have we moved over to the side of the road and pretended like we were truly justified in doing so? In Matthew 25, Jesus says this, "Then the king will turn to those on the left and say, 'Away with you, you cursed ones, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his demons. For I was hungry, and you did not feed me. I was thirsty, and you did not give me a drink. I was a stranger, and you didn't invite me into your home. I was naked, and you didn't give me clothing. I was sick and in prison, and you didn't visit me.' Then they will reply, 'Lord, when did we ever see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and not help you?' And he will answer, 'I tell you the truth, when you refuse to help the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were refusing to help me. Shared responsibility does not excuse us from our opportunities to be loving to those in need. Yet every single day we use it as an excuse to physically or mentally walk by those in our lives who are in need. In 2017, a man went on a shooting rampage outside of a school in California, killing 4 people and injuring 10 others. 2 of those who lost their lives were kids. A 31-year-old mom named Tiffany survived, but just barely. You see, she was dropping off her children at school when the gunman opened fire on her and her kids while they were still in the car. Tiffany shielded them as best as she could, but she was shot 5 times in her back, shoulders, and hip. She somehow found the strength to drive away and tried to get help from 4 different people. Listen to how Tiffany described one of her attempts to get help. She said, "I found some more strength to open my door, and I hopped out to a woman and asked, 'Can you help me? I'm shot, I'm dying, and my kids are in the car.' She said she couldn't help me because she only had a 2-seater and she was late for work." That hurt my heart a lot to hear her say that. Tiffany, amazingly, was able to drive herself 6 miles to the hospital, where she underwent a 4-hour emergency surgery to save her life. And she is alive today, no thanks to the 4 people who could have cared less whether she lived or died. I often wonder if we would have given her a ride to the hospital if she had banged on our window that day. I'm not telling you that you have to stop by every single flat tire and donate to every organization and walk in every march and battle every bully. But what I am saying is that it is time to keep our heads up and our eyes open and our hearts ready to love each and every neighbor that the Holy Spirit puts in front of us, no matter how many other people are around. It is time for us to say, sure, there might be 100 people who can help out in this situation, but there's only one of me, and God wants to use me. See a need, meet a need. And I pray that the next time God calls us to help our fellow man, we don't look all around to see who else he might be speaking to, but instead we stand up and say, "Here I am, Lord. Use me." Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Take care. God bless. Hope to see you soon.